Recorded Books presents The Counterstrike, Annihilation Book 2, by Joshua T. Calvert, narrated by Michael Braun. A quote from George Washington, 1732 to 1799. Be courteous to all, but friendly with a few, and let those few prove themselves before you put your trust in them. Prologue. The air tasted of cement and acrid chemicals, and he couldn't tell if that impression came from the filtration systems designed to protect him from the alien biosphere, or from the environment itself. Tom Bielefeld led his team of Dutch soldiers from the fast reconnaissance units in a westerly direction around a rugged ridge. He could have almost imagined he was on Earth. However, he only managed that when he looked at the ground, which was covered in knotty plants and moss in shades of yellow and green. As soon as he lifted his gaze, he saw the concentrated strangeness of this place. The hazy ochre daylight that struggled to force its way through the brown mountains of clouds high above them, where lightning flashed incessantly, looked like something out of the horror of a nuclear holocaust. At least, that was exactly how he would have imagined a post-nuclear war sky. The clouds seemed unnaturally distant, and yet he worried about what would happen should these artificial formations decide to rain down their moisture. There had been no reconnaissance data for Tom and his team to obtain. For the first 2 days of their mission, they had been constantly dousing themselves with disinfectant and wearing their camouflaged chemical suits, but by now they were slinking through the alien biosphere in their normal uniforms, with combat helmets and breathing masks. As a soldier, you quickly reached a point where you threw prescribed precautions overboard, because they made the mission you had been sent on impossible. The chemical suits had fallen into just that category. Uncomfortable, with poor visibility, acting as a miniature greenhouse that left them drowning in their own sweat. If alien microbes were to be their downfall, they still preferred that to drowning in their own juices, or suffering a fainting spell before they could send the first data set home. If we can send data home, he thought, mouth agape as his over-acidified muscles pushed their way to the forefront of his attention. The planet they were marching on possessed about 1.5 Earth masses, according to the eggheads in Brussels, and was a suitably unpleasant gravity sink. The miles they covered each day would have been exhausting even on Earth, without his body being 1.5 times as heavy as it was here. He would probably have to gnaw on this action for a long time, should he survive. Tom looked up as a mighty shadow fell in front of him, and regarded the huge mushroom that blocked their path. The dark brown thing was at least 20 feet tall, and with its thick trunk and white gills under the cap, looked as if it were cast from rubber. In its shadow, the cool temperatures dropped even further, and at first glance, he thought he saw movement in the undergrowth. So far, they had been able to observe hardly any animals, except for a few hand-sized critters that had looked like a cross between squirrels and lizards. The acid rain was most likely getting to them. Anders and Jasper had already suspected during their first night here, which had been less than 6 terrestrial hours, that something like a climate change event must have taken place, because everything seemed as it had been predicted for the Earth in the next 100 years. The ground was quite dry under the plants. The trees and mushrooms, reminiscent of his homeland yet strangely wrong-looking, made a withered, morbid impression on him. The sky was permanently overcast, and when it rained, it was better to look for the nearest mushroom as an umbrella, as the acid rain quickly made one realize where the weak points in the rain cape were. When they'd taken samples on the first 30-hour day, he'd picked up a nasty rash in a spot where his rubber gloves hadn't been properly connected to the chemical suit. All the more reason to forego that precaution. Whatever he could contract here had surely found its way into his bloodstream long ago, and he could still walk up
Sample complete. Ready to continue?